By the way, I've got new hearing aids in, and I think I'm talking very loudly because it's bouncing around in my head. I may take them out. This is fine. Can everybody hear me? Am I talking loudly enough you can hear me? Yeah, bring in the wings a little bit. Get around me. If the chairs are too heavy, stay where you are. I have to say, by way of introduction to this process, you know, I was out of town all week because of the construction on what used to be called Route 66. It's just a mess right now. And 495 that connects to it, that connects to the American Legion Bridge, it took us 9 hours to get home yesterday in traffic you can't believe on a Saturday afternoon. I'm still a little shaky, a little exhausted. When I got home, I sank in a chair. Well, first of all, we had to bring in the house everything we had packed in the car, which included not just regular clothes, but our tux, because there's a president's night and it's a formal dress, and it takes me an hour to get in that monkey suit to start with. And it weighs a ton, and Doris's evening gear was somewhat lengthy this way, but also heavy. All that had to come in, and her rollator broke down there. The handle just snapped off. So we had to buy another one that weighs about 2.5 times as much as the other one did. You have to lift it and put it in the car all the time. We got it all in the house, and we have stair lifts now going up and downstairs, so they're freight elevators to get the stuff back upstairs and back downstairs. And after we'd done that, and after driving 9 hours almost nonstop, I sank in a chair where I wanted to go down and work on this. I had, with the foresight of knowing what coming home from trustees meeting is like, and the inauguration of the president, and getting over having the invocation prayer for the inauguration and all of that, I finally found my way back downstairs, and honest to God, I had to hold onto the desk because the chair felt like it was floating, literally, because I'd been rolling so long during the day. What you have here is intentionally none of my doing. I copied some maps that I could find, and I then downloaded from Wikipedia a chart that I thought was just marvelous about all the wars that have been fought with or because of or whatever Israel. And I copied that, just dropped it. It was a nice chart with the flags of all the nations that fought in these wars, but all I could get was the file, the internet kind of language file, and it ran all together. So I separated. The only changes I made in it is I separated the paragraphs. I bolded some things I thought were interesting, and then it got to page 3. And we started the Gaza wars that had almost been non-stop. And you'll see what the paragraph looked like as I inherited it. By that time, I was holding on with both hands to the desk because it was floating too. And as a result, I did not separate the Gaza wars. And that was about 10:30, 11, and I said, well, I won't tell you what I said, but then let's look at some maps, a couple of maps here. I know this is too small for you to read, and that's all right. But if you look in the center of the map, you'll see Jerusalem on the left, right in the center, about even with the top of the Dead Sea. Can you find that space there, which is Jerusalem? This is the original proposal for the partitioning of Palestine into two sovereign states. This is how it finally ended up on the right-hand side, and this is the result of the 69 war that I keep talking about that made such changes. Because, well, it's not exactly that. It says it is, but it's not. But it still shows you that, and all you need to see is the graphics of it anyhow. Notice that blue is Israel in both cases, and the yellow is Palestine, and you see Palestine with the Gaza Strip down here along the Mediterranean, and then a finger going along the border of the Sinai. This is the Sinai Peninsula to your left. No military commander should have been happy with this division because, in fact, if there is a hostile war, notice the narrow waistline of Israel going by the West Bank. Israel would militarily, rather simply, be cut off into two sections. Are you with me what I'm saying? They took it without complaining. They accepted it just as it was proposed. The Palestinians and the Arab world around them refused to accept the UN petition, and we still have now what's called the West Bank because they did not choose the option of becoming a nation this way. They chose the option along with their friends in the Arab world. Now let's talk about the friends in the Arab world. You see again how overwhelming this place of Palestine is, both for the West Bank and for the Palestinians. Same nations, Lebanon up to the direct north, Syria, and the Syrian Golan Heights come down to the shore of the little Lake of Galilee here. And then Jordan, and then this pointing in is Saudi Arabia, the huge, think of Saudi Arabia, it's only a part of it here. But then you have Jordan that comes on down now as well. And then over this side, what's called Egypt is really the Sinai Peninsula on this map. And this is the Nile River coming down on the left side all the way. So here are Palestine and Israel in 1947 proposed as sovereign states. That's no problem for the Palestinians, but it's a big problem for the Israelis because they believe God gave them this land. And the Arabs say, the hell he did. So that's kind of where we start, so that this whole idea of the partitioning never was accepted jointly by the two sides. It's still not accepted. Israel has said it, and I don't mean to make a joke of it, but that's okay. We'll just conquer the whole thing, and you'll live with us. So that in the 67 war, I keep talking about the 67 war having such an impact. In the 67 war, let's see what happened. Israel conquered the Sinai, took it over, built cities, built school systems, found oil wells. I said the Arabs own all the oil in the Middle East. The Israelis would never give those oil wells back. But for a peace treaty, they did. So this is back in Egypt's hands again, and there is a peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. It gets shaky, but right now, if you read the newspapers closely, where is the food coming for relief in Gaza? It's coming through the Sinai Peninsula and into Gaza Strip right there. there's two ways in and out of Gaza. One is from the Sinai, and one is from Israel, up at the top of the West Bank. I've been through both of them. It's really an experience. But by the time they decide you really do have a passport that's valid, and either way you're going, it's the same headache. But let's turn the page one more time, and you see the Gaza Strip, way out of proportion. You can hardly see it on the map, and it's packed with a couple million people. And I've been there several times as well. I was on a peacekeeping committee for the National Council of Churches, representing our presiding bishop some years ago, and we went down through the Gaza Strip with a military escort fore and aft, sirens blaring. It is a packed, turbulent place on a good day. They elected Hamas, and Hamas is now in, kind of like cancer is in our body. You can't get rid of it once you got it. There are tunnels 60 feet deep at several levels in all directions with intersections underneath this whole Gaza Strip. I'd like to say if the Israelis think they're going in and going into those tunnels, they're nuts. It'll take a lot of Israelis. Then one more time, last page, 7. Is that the last page? Yeah. 7, you see just a slightly different map that shows you different things in perspective. You see Ramallah, that's the capital of the West Bank, of the Palestinian Authority, who's in charge in full management of Ramallah and some portions of the West Bank. Jerusalem, right beside it, Jerusalem has been nationalized by the Israelis. There now is East and West Jerusalem still, but the Israelis actually govern all of Jerusalem now. How that will all end up, if peace ever comes to the Holy Land, we'll see. There's been an argument made, and I supported it pretty publicly, for Jerusalem to become an international city, being the capital both of the West Bank and of Israel. That got me within hours a visit from the Israeli embassy, ambassador rather, from the embassy, to say, tell me one other time that's ever happened in the history of the world. He didn't like the idea very much. So part of the thing is to help us together get a grasp of how naturally, givenly turbulent this situation is. I mean, for people that mean well, but who worship differently, who follow different political directions, and who must share. I had a shopkeeper in the souk, Arab word for marketplace. In the Arab souk, I had a number of friends when I was regularly going there. And one of the shopkeepers invited me to his shop for some coffee. You probably don't want to take it. It kind of stands up outside the cup. But you got to drink it because that's an offense. Anyhow, he said to me, you know, this mess is crazy. This is maybe 20 years ago. He said to me, this mess is crazy because, you know, we're farmers. We grow things. We're happy in Samaria, which is most of the West Bank. We're happy there. We ship to Jordan and we ship to other places, and we make a pretty good living. And then we run shops, he says. I wanted to tell him, you know, the Israelis not bad at that either. But anyway, he said, you know, I understand that the Israelis fly American jets, but they put their own software in it. and won't tell the Americans what they're doing. And by the way, when they've been in wars, they've been about 7-1 in air combat with the Russian equipment that the Arabs are flying. He said, you know, they know how to run things. We know how to farm things. If we feed them, they ought to prosper. We ought to both do well. He should be in the Senate. Anyhow, first the pictures. This is a mess. And it's not for us to go over and tell them how to solve it. Although I think our president did pretty well when he said, you'll be a lot better off if you don't invade Gaza. Think what we did in Afghanistan. We made a mistake we couldn't get out of it. The whole world saw it. Biden had quite a story to hit Netanyahu with, and I haven't seen a newspaper in 4 days, so I don't know whether they've invaded now or not. Anyhow, it's important just to understand what the reality is apart from any particular moment of argumentation. We are in hostile cultures. We're with people that take their faith very seriously. But we're also in a culture of political untruth. Both sides. Something of what we're struggling with here in the United States with misinformation. And the internet makes it all worse, and it's international in scope. So the bottom line is, this is a mess over there, and it's a threat to the world. Now, I didn't even mention the troublemakers don't live here. Troublemaker, Iran. Who trained Hamas for the attack 4 weeks ago? We know now Iran did. We know they also modified weapons to bring them up to date so that they would kill efficiently. We know that now. We know that they've been training for this event, and they say, we didn't sick them on you. No, they didn't. They just prepared them to do it themselves. Guess who else is in it? A fellow by the name of Putin, the one that's running the war in Ukraine, also part of the same party. He was in this thing way back at the beginning. He teamed up with Egypt in one of these wars. It's just a mess. If we could just get the people who live there to talk and not be talking to people who don't live there, who put the money into the hands of the terrorists, we maybe would have a shot. But what we have to do more than yell at either one of them is pray for them. There's no way you can suffer a surprise onslaught that kills women and children. They're decapitated when childless at birth. There's no sanctity to life in terrorism. Israel does not fight that way generally, but they have a hard time controlling a population who wants to kill them all. Israel was evenly split almost 4 weeks ago with saying to Netanyahu, who's a war hawk of such, say to Netanyahu, don't fight, let's make peace. We can't keep this up forever. Half of Israel's population was saying that 4 weeks ago. 90-some% are saying, now, kill them all. So this is not going to go anywhere by getting meaner. It's not going to go anywhere, but and I confess to you, I'm scared. People would say to me, would you go over there again? Yeah, I'd go tomorrow. Except when Hamas attacked there, even with the craziness, even with the assassinations, even with the violence, More people were shot in Washington, D.C. last weekend than were shot in Jerusalem. Not last weekend, but before this started. I was there having dinner on the rooftop of a Palestinian hotel that had been pulled out of the garbage and rehabbed and made just beautiful. You think you're in a New York hotel 5 blocks across behind the desk. I told you I was going to take them out. 5 clocks around. Oh boy, they sure is loud for me. 5 clocks across the front of the registration desk, showing you the time in major capitals around the world. Jerusalem doesn't know there was another part of the world until the Palestinians got updated, bought a hotel chain, and have done very well at it. I always traveled with the Palestinian agency when I took groups over there. You were going to get Palestinian bus drivers no matter who you were with. But tourism is a major industry in Palestine and in Israel, not just Palestine. And I would laughingly say, well, you know what? The Arabs are the best bus drivers in the world unless you go there during Ramadan when they can't eat all day long. You get a little irritable that way. But the guides are good. You often have an Israeli guide on an Arab bus. All guides in Israel are licensed. Just like I said, and of course, if you went over with a shovel in your hand, they'd break the handle over your neck. Unless you're licensed, got a degree, and worked with an Israeli archaeologist. Well, it's sort of the same thing with guiding in Israel. I have not heard a bad guide, because you don't guide if you don't attend twice a year the updating guide training courses. And you have a little pin that says, I am a guide. So much worked well, even in the midst of all that. Now that some places that used to be in the West Bank under Israeli government are now using Arab guides in those locations. I was stuck one time with a tour which wouldn't take us to Jericho. He said, you've been there so many times, you guide them at Jericho, because it's tense. You feel it everywhere. Am I afraid to go? I haven't been. I started to say, we were having dinner at the end of a day, and suddenly were gunshots a couple blocks away from our hotel, and some of the tourists in the restaurant said, what's the celebration today? And I said something that sounded like Hebrew and said, that's just a celebration, don't worry about it. But it was an outbreak about 2 blocks away from us. In East Jerusalem, does the joint government work where Israel says, you police it and we'll police it together? Well, except when it comes time to do something like collect the garbage, the Israeli says, let the Palestinians do it. The Palestinians said, you're here, you're doing it. Nobody picks up the garbage. That's when they're not fighting. I was there during the Intifada when everybody was afraid to go and all the shops were closed and all of that. And across the street from my Palestinian hotel was the cleaning service and laundry service. And I'd go over with my bag of laundry and they'd say, well, you know, we won't be open tomorrow. I only asked once to that message, why? Because it was Intifada day. That was a secret so well kept that the Israeli police never knew when the Intifada was going to strike, but they tell me. It's that kind of tension with people who share a land, who don't agree on a government, and don't agree on a style of politics. They welcome dictatorships. We generally don't, although I'm not sure about us any longer, but it's just, look at the map. Everything around them, and you have in this little center here, Israel. This goes all the way down to Eilat, which goes down to the sea that comes up to it there. It's about a day and a half's comfortable trip from Jerusalem down to Eilat. It's a long way down. But all of this is desert. All of this is desert. When you get up to the Galilee, it's lush. When you're in Samaria, which is here mostly the West Bank, it's lush too. That's why the Palestinians say, we grow the tomato ship, and the Jordanians, we thrive. Down in Jericho, you would think you were in Florida because it's by the Dead Sea. Anyway, that's just to give you an idea of what the culture is there. One is Arab. I'm dumb country boy from the West, and I don't know from nothing. And they have these bake shops that just awesome. And they have pyramids of pastries on display in big round aluminum trays. You've seen them, you're laughing. Awesome stuff. I walk in and ask for an apple pastry. I'm sorry, that's not our tradition. We use nuts and honey, but we don't use fruit. Fruit spoils, nuts and honey don't. For Bedouins, which is our heritage, you remember now, we live in the desert. We are Bedouins at root. And so our pastries have to be preservable. So, and of course every morning at 5 o'clock you get awakened with the first call to prayer in Arabic. So it's pretty hard to pray with them and not to yell at them. That's another thing. And they don't climb up the towers anymore. They sit in a study somewhere with a microphone and chant the prayers and send them out at 100 watts out of the tower of the mosque. I'm just rambling for a moment to try to say how very different this world is, and how very deeply passions run. Hebrews were there, we think, by modern scholarship, the Hebrews arrived about 1000 BCE. David, 900, Solomon, 900 BCE. That's when the kingdom of north, kingdom of south flourished. But they were thrown out by the Roman emperor after the second Jewish rebellion in Jerusalem against Rome. They were banished from Jerusalem altogether. They came back and they thrived. We talked about it it doesn't matter. You all know. That's what happens when you don't sleep at night. But Shean, the excavations just a week ago, talking about the awesome excavations that went until the middle of the Byzantine Empire, Roman Empire. So the Jews came back and they thrived. But once again, we're talking about 900 to 700 was when Jerusalem was destroyed. I'm sorry, when Samaria was destroyed, and 586, 600 round figures when Jerusalem was destroyed. And then the Jews were not back in a governing phase, except about 130 years before Christ, when we had the reestablished, where Cyrus let them go back from Babylonian captivity when Cyrus, by the way, he would be king of Iran today, but Cyrus let them go home and actually gave them money to rebuild the temple, and gave them ability to reestablish it. Made Judea a Persian province, but under Jewish government. And that ran to just before the birth of Christ, about 50 years before Christ was born, when Rome conquered the area and established its. So since then, it's been difficult for the Jews to lay a major claim to the land. So the Jews say, but God gave it to us, it's ours. It's their belief. And they live with that belief. They're still counting years, the beginning of creation, from counting all the names of the Bible back to Adam and assigning a date to it. So, as they believe, and I'm not making fun of them when I say this, I'm just saying our religious systems have been founded by us, no matter what we believe. So this is kind of what we're dealing with, and then we've got outside pressure, and we've got anti-Semitism on steroids. The whole Arab world rejected the UN petition. The whole Arab world, not a single Arab nation said this is a good thing for us. Now remember what else is happening. Remember what else is happening here. What were we going to remember? Oh my. What else is happening? The issue of the possession of the land was also out of the time between World War I and World War II. We know about 6 million Jews being gassed to death or tortured to death or shot or whatever. By the way, before there was the Israeli Museum, there was a little house not as big as this room, with plaster walls near Zion Gate, which is side to the Jewish quarter. And there were names written on top of names on every wall in that house. And it was memorial to the known names who died in the Holocaust. It was packed with Jews and some Gentiles, all the while looking for their family names. I was there, I watched it. This is the place they call home, and after the 6 billion Jews, they said in mass, to heck with this, we're not going to trust anybody ever to take care of us again. You know, our own United States rejected a shipload of Jews running from the Holocaust. We would not let them land in New York City. We weren't there. It wasn't everybody else, folks. It was us too. It's called anti-Semitism. The UN, reacting to the Holocaust, reacting to those awesome stories that generated before and at the early days of the war, before that time, the UN, when it comes into existence, the UN, more in guilt than anything else, decides that there needs to be a homeland for these people where they take care of themselves. Thus the petition that we see in the first that I gave you. Out of guilt? Was it good sense? I don't know. If you create an alien nation that hasn't been on the turf in any functioning way for several hundred years, they were really part of the Turkish Empire in the later years of their history. If you think you're going to just mark off a space for somebody who really isn't there yet, you tend to panic the people who live there. One of our members at Good Shepherd has a rifle across the mantelpiece, and I said, "Did you ever fire that?" I said, "That's like the Revolutionary War where everybody had grabbed the gun because the Brits were coming," and we laughed about it. But that's what Palestine was like. Because after World War I, there were significant number of Jews who said about Germany and Europe in general, "We're getting out of here." And they went back and started what's called the kibbutz, plural kibbutzim. And they are group farms. They went back and bought from Arabs land. And the Arabs gladly sold it to them because they were bringing good money. But suddenly that began to be a lot of people. It was already having anti-immigrant feeling that some people down south have. So that Palestinians are looking around and saying, "Wait a minute, what's happening to our land?" And the UN steps in and said, "We're going to divide it. We're going to give half to them and half to them." When you read the text, you'll find that it was first a rebellion on both sides. The kibbutzim grabbed guns to protect their investment. The Arabs grabbed guns to protect their home. It was not an organized army, but it was a terrible fight. It finally, when Israel finally accepted the UN decision and when the British mandate ended, Israel accepted the territory they had been given and proclaimed themselves a nation. The Arabs have never accepted the UN resolution, and so it's called the West Bank, not Palestine. It's called the West Bank. And after the '67 war, it's been functionally Israel, because Israel conquered the Sinai, gave it back. I forgot to mention that sloping hill that comes down to the Sea of Galilee looks like this beautiful grassy plain from the opposite side of the Sea of Galilee, or the Lake of Galilee. Well, you hear about this as the Golan Heights. Have you heard the word Golan Heights? Well, the Golan Heights has, militarily speaking, full view of the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is Israel's farmland. Terrorists would shoot farmers right out of the tractor saddles on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. So when Israel suddenly found itself on a Sabbath day at war with nations from all sides, they moved kind of like this, took the Golan Heights. It's under Israeli control now. And President Trump, may he rest, President Trump encouraged Netanyahu to annex the Golan Heights from Syria, and he did. So, of course, we put our embassy in Jerusalem. Talk about scratching a scab. We put our embassy in Jerusalem. We kept it at Tel Aviv all the time, because Jerusalem was a contested city, and we did the wrong thing. We said we'll put our embassy in Tel Aviv. That's where it is now. Not Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem. So we've done some things to agitate it and to make it worse than maybe necessarily has to be. If you take the Arab, I told you I could argue either side. I could argue either side with tears in my eyes. I understand. You hear talk now and again about the right to return that has never happened, all these displaced Arabs in other places in refugee camps and all that kind of thing. Some in Gaza. What are those refugees about? During that rebellion, where there's this rebel army on both sides fighting, the Arabs told the Arabs, "Go, in 2 weeks we're going to have these people out of here and you can come home." As they tell the story, we didn't even lock our doors. That's one side. And how do we feel about immigrants coming into the United States? Too many? Are they the source of all our crime? I doubt it. That's the first thing that's still not settled. Now let me switch sides. Let me go on the other side of the river and say, you know, if you were Israelis, would you want Arabs living next to you? And you could scare me to death. Hamas just proved why I should be scared. So that nobody's guiltless on either side. The idea of having sovereign states that recognize one another, and maybe a peacekeeping UN mission to make sure both of them behave. In fact, the UN's there now, has been there from the beginning. The Bible doesn't tell us about it, but one of the Israeli kings, I'll tell you his name, Solomon. One of the Israeli kings had non-Israeli, non-Jewish wives. So he built a temple for the non-Jewish wives. And it's built on the hill that Jews have traditionally called the Hill of Evil Counsel, because it had a temple on it built by. Guess where the UN headquarters is today? On the Hill of Evil Counsel. The Israelis love it there, because they're not sure the UN is their friend either. I'm going on and on. What I would like to ask you to do is take the time to read this history of violence in the land. Still, most of the Arab world doesn't accept the right of Israel to exist. They don't accept the UN's right to create the location. Iran says if we ever get an atomic bomb, we're going to wipe Israel off the map. It will be no more. They don't even live there. And of course, anytime there's something to be stirred, Vladimir will be interested in it. And they're the victims of it. So one of the things I guess I would say is, have the land and these people in your prayers. They're not evil people. One side feels their land has been invaded and unrighteously so. The other person says we're prevented from being in our homeland, and we've been here as long as you have if you count all the years of history. And they're almost right about that. So what we don't need is a bunch of wiseacres. What we don't need is a bunch of politicians yelling and screaming about something they neither understand nor in truth care about. All they care about is it doesn't help them politically. And this is the worst time to have a major issue in Palestine. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what the Israelis are going to do. No intelligent nation can accept rockets flying in all the time and laughing them off because they had the Iron Dome that they could intercept 90% of them. So you have to expect human nature says we have to respond somehow to this. We have to put an end to it. They're saying, get Hamas out of Gaza. Okay, volunteers for the first to go down in those tunnels and look for them. I'm not going to volunteer, and I love the land. So anyway, I hope this helps you a little bit understand what's happening there and how complex it is and how emotionally it sues you. And if you read the history of the wars, you get an even better picture of it. And I didn't write it. Published on the internet as the history of that area. So you have it. Change I made was bolding the type. Questions? Have to speak up, Alan. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. We're out of time. When they have removed the source of flying rockets, when they remove the source of surprise attacks, that's what we would say about any of our boundaries. You know, you have, as President Biden said repeatedly, they have a right to defend themselves. And the question is, when do we settle the issues of peace with them? And if you've got people telling them, Iran, Moscow, you've got people telling them that Israel has no right to exist, then they're equipping you